My name is Henry R. Mockingbird, aka Ramsey Alley. This is a review series called 20th Century Reviews, a series dedicated to reviewing films all throughout the 20th century. Get a load of that, young stinker. Yes, folks, that was me during the very first review I ever posted on this platform. Back when I used to look like a cross between John Belushi from Animal House and Alan from the Hangover movies. Well, now it's 6 years later. Oh my lordy. And with my 200th episode pretty much around the corner, I figured I'd go way back in time, and re-review the first 4 movies I have ever covered on YouTube. I'm going to re-review the first 4 movies. You heard that correctly. And welcome to Memory Lane Month. And let's go back with an old classic. Cue that first intro with Upgrade! I really hope you enjoyed that intro. I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache here, and I'm going to establish a couple of rules for these re-reviews. 2, actually. There will be about half new content and critiques, and half revisiting of some of my old content and critiques. So, for this re-review, let us review the very first movie I ever reviewed on YouTube. That, of course, being Gold Diggers of 1933. So, before I begin the re-review, I'm going to talk about Busby Berkeley. Good old Busby Berkeley. I owe quite a lot to him. No, this whole review series owes quite a lot to him. I reviewed his movies, joked about him, and even referenced him quite a few times. And now it's time for me to give good old Busby his flowers. Busby Berkeley, who also makes a cameo in this movie, has had quite the impact on not just the movie musical, but cinema in general. Busby Berkeley got his start in 1930 doing musical numbers for Eddie Cantor movies. But his genius did not blossom until he started working for Warner Brothers. Using the medium of film, he would create lavishly shot and choreographed musical numbers that could not be possible on a regular stage. Up until this point, musical numbers in movies were shot front and center. But with Busby Berkeley, he would film his actors using different camera angles. He would film with one camera, but he made it do things that had never been done before. He invented a unique monorail system that would enhance camera dimension and mobility. He would even saw holes in the ceilings for his famous overhead shots, causing one Warner Brothers executive to scream, "Now Buzzley Burley's going through the roof." After he left Warner Brothers, he continued his work at MGM, starting with a couple of musicals with Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. But like most historical cinematic figures, he was anything but perfect. In fact, he was a perfectionist. He was infamous for putting several actors in literal danger. Actors like Esther Williams and Ann Miller have gone on record of how dangerous he was to work with. Despite all that, the guy has left quite an impact on cinema and has been referenced countless times. You know the opening in Indiana Jones' Temple of Doom? You know the whole musical number? Yeah, that's literally a reference to Buzzley Burley. Heck, even Jim Henson made a reference to Buzzley Burley in The Great Muppet Caper with the Miss Piggy song. Now that I'm done with that intro, enough background, let us dive into this rabbit hole. This is Gold Diggers of 1933. Things get tough for Carol and her showgirl pals when the Great Depression kicks in and all their shows get canceled. Unknown, wealthy, up-and-coming songwriter Brad funds their next big show, but when his snooty brother threatens to disown him, when the brother and Brad's family find out about the show, Carol and her showgirl pals decide to take both Brad's brother and the wealthy lawyer, Mr. Peabody, out on a wild ride. So, what are my thoughts on Gold Diggers of 1933, 6 years later? Well, my opinion really hasn't changed. It's a good movie. It was a good movie when I first reviewed this movie back in 2019, and it's a good movie in 2025. The movie itself was co-directed by Buzzley Burley. It was mainly directed by Mervyn LeRoy, who produced The Wizard of Oz and directed Gypsy. And the film itself was a remake of a 1929 film called Gold Diggers of Broadway. Now here's where I come with the first revisiting part of the review. In the original review, I said, I wish I could see this someday. What I meant to say was that this film, Gold Diggers of Broadway, was mostly lost to time, only existing via screenshots and a few clips. And that piece of lost media was directed by Roy Del Ruth, who directed the original Maltese Falcon and It Happened on Fifth Avenue. And Gold Diggers of Broadway was itself a remake of a 1923 silent film also called Gold Diggers. And that film was an adaptation of a play also called Gold Diggers. That play was written by Avery Hopwood. Everybody got that? Good. Going back to Gold Diggers of 1933, it was originally titled High Life. WB also brought in writer Ben Markinson, who also wrote It Happened on Fifth Avenue. And a casting choice floating around was George Brett, who played Pat Denning in 42nd Street. He was originally going to play Brett's brother. Originally, Gold Diggers of 1933 wasn't going to be a musical. It wasn't until the success of 42nd Street where they decided to change it into a musical. And when the film finally released, it became Warner Brothers' most successful film of 1933. It got an Oscar nomination for Best Sound Design, got a radio adaptation with Lux Radio, and got 2 remakes, Gold Diggers of 1935 and Gold Diggers of 1937. That film had both Dick Powell and Joan Blondell. The first musical number has Ginger Rogers and a bunch of chorus girls all wearing money-themed bikinis with large coins covering their lady private parts, with them holding large coins in their hands and kicking their feet up in the air, and them making a really big wave with the coins. The next musical number is Petting in the Park, which, outside of having literal chimps smooching, is pretty progressive. You have a fat and thin couple, a African American couple, an Asian couple, an old couple, and a really young couple. There's also a baby on roller skates being chased by a bunch of coppers on roller skates. Fun fact, that baby is played by dwarf actor Billy Barty, who's no stranger to my reviews, as he played both a chess piece and the Duchess's baby in Alice in Wonderland 33, was a mouse in Footlight Parade, and has a very small appearance in Bride of Frankenstein. He also did a lot of suit work in many Sid and Marty Krofft productions. He was also in films like Willow, Legend, UHF, and was in the cult classic Masters of the Universe, but his most famous role was voicing Figment the Dragon. Also in the Pettin' in the Park musical number, it starts to rain and all of the girls go behind this large curtain where we see them taking their clothes off in shadows. Gee, can you tell this was made during the pre-code era? And we see Billy Barty pulling up the curtain while they're still dressing. And just look at the expression on Billy Barty's face. That is a look that says, yeah, I'm naughty, I'm a bad boy. The next dance number is the Shadow Waltz as part of the In the Shadows song. And the way the dancers are dancing, it's almost like they're floating on air. And at one point, their violins become glow in the dark. And I don't know if it's just me or does the shape they're forming look kind of phallic. And at one point, while they're dancing, we get an overhead shot, and it looks almost like a flower. And then they have their glow in the dark violins look like a clock. And then they form into an even larger violin. The final musical number that closes the film is My Forgotten Man, where we see marching soldiers. This part was a response to the Bonus Army, which happened a year before this movie, where a bunch of World War I veterans marched on Washington, D.C., to demand the payment that they were owed during World War I. The whole Bonus Army was led by Admiral Walter Waters. The whole Bonus Army ended up having a whole cavalry of soldiers, tanks, and gas bombs handed to them. This whole cavalry was led by General MacArthur. Everyone involved in the Bonus Army ended up having their shelters burned to the ground. And the fact that Warner Brothers had the guts to call out such a travesty is really gutsy, and is something modern Warner Brothers would not have the goal to do. I'm looking at you, Warner Brothers Discovery. Another thing we get in the My Forgotten Man musical number is a bread line of men getting coffee, donuts, and sandwiches. Yeah, this movie has its feet firmly set in the Depression. Unlike most movies around this time that would pretty much ignore the Great Depression, nope, this movie focuses straight on it. And the whole commentary of the Great Depression holds up a lot more today than it did when I first reviewed this movie, especially past COVID, where we have plenty of men and women losing their jobs. Let's talk about the characters. First, there's Carol, who of all the characters in this movie is probably the one with the most depth, as she is selfless and is always looking out for everyone's well-being, and is not afraid to call things out. And she's played by the ever underrated Joan Blondell, who sadly is only known to most audience nowadays as that waiter from Grease. And then there's Faye, played by Ginger Rogers, who's pretty much annoying to all the other girls, but not to the audience. And the only reason she's annoying to the other girls is because she's the prettiest. They always give her some wisecrack. She's basically one big flirt. Up next is Barney Hopkins, the girl's boss, who has everything rearing to go to put on a show except the dough. Barney Hopkins himself is a gruff, no-nonsense sort of dude. Barney Hopkins is played by Stoneface himself, Ned Sparks, who has been caricatured quite a lot in classic cartoons.
I go everywhere, I do everything, and I never have any fun.
And is said, not confirmed, to be the inspiration for Squidward from SpongeBob. A personal favorite of mine of these comic relief characters in this movie is Trixie, played by Aileen McMahon. Outside of being really freaking funny with her wise-ass remarks and her snarky humor, she's also a clever girl and is like the big sister to Polly. Let's talk about her now. Outside of being cute as a button, she's also the wide-eyed innocent of the group, and her relationship between Brad is basically puppy love. Speaking of which, let's talk about Brad. Brad, outside of being dripping with talent, is loyal and kind, and secretly rich. But he goes to great lengths to keep said secret, because he wants to make it on his own. But when their leading man has back pains, he's forced to star in the show. And his secret gets out, which is where his brother, Lawrence, comes in. Lawrence is an arrogant, snooty, rich snob. Lawrence is played by Warrant Williams, who is Julius Caesar, co-starring alongside Claudette Colbert as Cleopatra, and played Dr. Lloyd in The Wolfman. And once Lawrence hits the scene, things start to get a little interesting, with this whole subplot between him, Mr. Peabody, and the girls. And hilarious hijinks ensue, where we get a cameo from Sterling Holloway, delivering a hat. And if you don't know who Sterling Holloway is, you most certainly should. He was the voice of a lot of Disney characters, with his most famous one being Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, help and bother.
Also, there's Mr. Peabody, who acts all snooty, but what he really wants is to be a sugar daddy. And man, is he having a ball. And so is Guy Kippy, who plays him. With this being a musical, you would expect songs. And songs are what you will get, my good sir, provided to you by Al Durbin and Harry Warrant, who wrote songs like Roman Scandals, 42nd Street, Dames, and Gold Diggers of 1935, Footlight Parade, and the Harvey Girls. And in addition to that, Harry Warrant wrote songs like Jeepers Creepers, Where'd You Get Those Peepers? All the songs for Gold Diggers of 1933 are great, like I Got to Have a Torch song, Pattin' in the Park, and In the Shadows. But the two songs that stick out the most are We're in the Money and My Forgotten Man. Both of them are very different, as you will soon see. Let's cue the music.
We're in the money, we're in the money. We've got a lot of what it takes to get along. We're in the money, the sky is sunny. Oh man, depression, you are through, you done us wrong. Remember my forgotten man? You put a rifle in his hand. You sent him far away. You shouted, hip hooray! But look at him today. Remember my forgotten man. You had him cultivate the land. He walked behind a plow. The sweat fell from his brow. But look at him right now. And once he used to love me. I was happy then. He used to take care of me. Won't you bring him back again? 'Cause ever since the world began, a woman's got to have a man. Forgetting him, you see, means you're forgetting me. Like my forgotten man.
Are there any problems with this film? Yes, two in fact. Despite this whole subplot of Lawrence and Peabody being tricked, having some, let's say, funny moments, it's also infuriating and predictable because even if you haven't seen the movie, you know how this story goes. They're going to change and they'll be better people. So you're pretty much just waiting for the truth to come out that they were tricked. Another issue with this film is that it introduces this subplot where Trixie suspects Brad of being a criminal on the run from the law because they don't know where he got all that money from to fund the show. And this whole subplot is completely dropped like a hot pancake the moment the truth comes out that Brad was a millionaire. If you want a good introduction to Buzzley Burtley's work, check this film out. 5 gold stars. Well, that's all I have to say about Gold Diggers of 1933. Well, until the next review, I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache, signing off, and Memory Lane Month has just begun.